how many documents are being created, presentations, slide decks, proposals? How many of those types of things are being created within your organization that are using AI? How many of them lack originality? Welcome back to the Digital Ministry Podcast. I'm your host, Nick. And as always, the Digital Ministry Podcast is brought to you by Media Impact International. Media Impact International is your partner for digital ministry worldwide. MII, for those that don't know, MII is offering follow-up services. If you are in any type of ministry that's using digital tools, and you are in need of either expanding or supporting your outreach efforts with follow-up teams that are trained to engage people in spiritual conversations and connect them to local communities following that engagement, MII is your source. You need to be working with MII. So just a little shout out for MII here for sponsoring this podcast and making it possible. I am coming to you today from Washington, D.C. For those of you that are watching on YouTube or by video, you might see me in a tie. I don't wear ties often, but here in the nation's capital, we've been meeting with senators this morning and some firms yesterday that are involved in technology advancement, and AI has been part of the conversation. There's a couple of things that I'm learning and just some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. So if you're listening and you can't see my lovely tie on here, then you might be wondering why the audio sounds different. It's because I'm just recording this off my computer, but I wanted to grab some timely thoughts and share them with you on AI. I've really got two things that I want to cover. The first thing is, I had this conversation yesterday about the use of AI. And as a marketer, I'm always watching trends, but I'm listening to people talk more and more about the efficiency that their teams are gaining with content creation and brainstorming. There is no doubt that AI is helping teams be much more efficient. Really, I think that our goal should be, if we're using AI tools, we want to really 10x or 20x the output and really the value of individual members of our teams. I think that that is completely possible, but it requires our teams to use AI intentionally and in a specific way. One of the things that I think I see, and I'm just curious if any of you listening might have experienced this as well, there's already, for decades, there has been a tendency for groupthink. And for those that are unfamiliar with that term, groupthink is not a good term. It's not a good thing. Groupthink is this idea where everybody kind of in a conversation kind of ends up saying the same thing and you're not really adding any value. I've been taking some classes recently as part of an MBA program. And one of the things that the professors really focus on is originality. Are you bringing an original idea, thought to the table that is moving the conversation forward? Is this adding value to others? Do you have a unique insight? There's been a lot of examples of this through the years. Maybe just Google it and look up some examples. I don't have any kind of queued up for you. Maybe I should have. If I were a better podcast host, I'd probably have done that. But we're all familiar with like the standout ad campaigns. Apple comes to mind with their 1984 ad, very famous when they launched the Macintosh. Even when the iPod launched, when the iPhone launched, they had these brilliant marketing campaigns. A lot of them were done by Saatchi and Saatchi out of San Francisco. It's a wonderful firm, very creative. Nike is another one. Nike has done a great marketing work through the years with their Just Do It campaign. They've ridden that horse for decades. The reason why these stand out to us is because they're different. They're edgy. They take a stand. They form an opinion. And then what inevitably happens is people try to copy that. It's like, oh, that worked for them. Maybe it can work for me. And so then they try to be carbon copies of that. But like anybody who's ever written, a carbon copy on that transfer paper, you write on the first sheet and with a pen, it looks okay. The second sheet, it's a little fuzzy. By the time you copy that over and over, the quality just becomes so much less and it loses all of its punch. I think one of the things that we see happening with AI is that there's groupthink that's occurring. These large language models, these LLMs, they're trained on the average of human thought. I mean, they're very knowledgeable, but they're also very safe. Like everything just kind of ends up sounding the same. Have you noticed when you're reading a paper, when you're reading a blog post, it sounds like AI? Like everything starts to sound the same, and like people are getting really good at saying, I think this was written with AI. What's the hallmark? What's the marker of that makes us think that? It's safe, it's bland, it's plain. Like how many documents are being created, presentations, slide decks, proposals? How many of those types of things are being created within your organization that are using AI? How many of them lack originality? If your team is kind of overusing AI or using it incorrectly, all your stuff is going to start to sound the same. And that's, maybe something that we desire from a brand perspective. But if it sounds like everybody else's stuff, that's not a good thing. We want originality. We want to demonstrate boldness. We want to demonstrate that there's something unique that we have to offer. And that requires us to still use our brains, to still kind of think outside of the algorithm, to break those trends and those norms with some type of original thought and original idea. Please encourage your teams. If you're a leader listening to this, encourage your teams to bring originality, bring themselves into the conversation, bring themselves to the table. I read an interesting article yesterday. I think it was on LinkedIn where I came across this, but this group had recently done brain mapping across a number of students, and they asked them to write essays. Whenever the group of students that was told to use AI first for brainstorming and then write their paper and then edit it themselves, whenever they used that process, yes, everything sounded the same. But interestingly, they had them connected up to these brain monitors. The brain was dark in the creative spaces. It was really just their brains were showing that they were just going through the motions. By contrast, the group of students that were asked to put in the work, think about the essay, write it, and then use AI to edit it and to create content out of AI off of their original work, you had all the creativity areas of the brain lighting up. So this was a really interesting lesson and study for me to read, because it reminded me of this idea that we need boldness. Don't become more and more average. If you're just using AI first for content creation, your stuff is going to be in the same. That's not going to stand out. It's just going to be noise. At MII, we've done so much work to help people think about their target persona, what resonates with that person, what type of messaging is really going to make a connection. Your understanding of your target persona is the starting point. Start there. Think about that person. Have empathy for them. Think about if you were sitting across the table from them for coffee or tea, what would the conversation be like? Start there. Use the AI tools to amplify your message, to create 10 or 20 pieces of content out of that original idea, but start with the original idea. If you don't, it's just going to be bland and boring. And that's something that I think we all need to guard against. This is going to be a quick podcast today. I just have one other thought I want to share with you, and this is around some of these AI tools. So continuing in this vein, I'm reading some interesting things about terms and conditions. And this is something that we've had guests on the podcast in the past that talk about. You really have to know and understand the terms and conditions of these tools that we're using. Oftentimes I'll get calls. People know that I've done a ton of work with Facebook and Google and companies like that in the past. So I'll get these calls from folks that say, hey, my ad campaign got shut down or my account's been blocked. Do you know anybody that can unlock it for me? And 9 times out of 10, there was some type of violation with terms and conditions. It isn't necessarily the case that these companies, these platforms want to block your message. Usually your message or the way that it's been presented has violated some kind of term and condition. And oftentimes it's not a person that's making that decision. It's been automatically blocked by an algorithm. We're thinking a lot about, had this conversation this week with some people here in Washington about what terms are being used. Actually, the example that was given was DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's been well publicized that there's a group of people that are writing computer programs and using algorithms to really evaluate the federal budget and make decisions about what gets cut. And there's algorithms that are sorting through that massive amount of information. And they're looking for keywords. If there's certain keywords that exist, budgets can be cut, teams can be laid off automatically. It's no different with your ad campaigns. There's keywords, there's certain elements that have violated a term and condition somewhere, and they automatically get shut off. So you really have to understand the terms and conditions if you want to navigate these platforms well and use them for your benefit. But there's another angle to this also. CapCut is a platform that helps with content creation. Some of you may have used it. It's a powerful editing tool. So it's got effects and filters. You can drop video into CapCut. I mean, some pretty amazing editing using AI. But they recently updated their terms and conditions, and they state that CapCut has full ownership. I'm reading this now from their website. Full ownership and control over content created using CapCut software, including the right to use, sell, or leverage your image or likeness for AI purposes without compensation. So that's some kind of scary language. You don't necessarily own your own content on some of these tools that your team might be using. These companies can use that. They can profit off of it. They don't have any reason or need to compensate you for that. And I think that this opens up the door to some potential for some of these companies to create filters. And I don't want to overblow this here because I'm moving into speculation a little bit, but think about if an algorithm is evaluating a data set and it's looking for keywords to make decisions about what gets allowed and what doesn't get allowed, what's a violation of a terms of service and what's not a violation. Think about expanding that idea beyond keywords. Think about expanding that idea to images and likenesses, or to voice patterns, or like, I've got a digital footprint for my voice. I realize that by publishing a podcast, my voice is out there. It can be analyzed. It can be used. There might be a day when my voice patterns, the sound of my voice, is flagged in an algorithm and is no longer, valid or allowed on a platform. It's an interesting thing to think about and consider. I would make sure, if I were in a digital media role, I would make sure that the tools that I'm using allow me to retain ownership of my content. If you're using a tool that says that they own your content, just the use of it, even if you're paying for that service, just the use of it gives them the right to do whatever they want with those images, with your likeness, in the case of CapCut. And that the follow-on effects of that could be used for filtering and for segmentation in the future. So it's something to think about. Please take the time to read through the terms of service, the terms and conditions of these tools that you're using. And ironically, AI is a great way to do this. You can do a search like I just did on an AI platform. I said, hey, let's look at all of the top social media content creating platforms that are using AI and review the terms of service of all of these and give me a summary on content ownership rights. I'm not going to tell you what I found. I'm going to let you go do that homework for yourself, but I'd encourage you to do the same thing. Right now, there's a lot of ownership uncertainty around copyright law and around AI generated content. and specifically content without a significant amount of human creative input. And so this goes back to the first point that we talked about. If you are first starting with your own original ideas, concepts, content creation, and then you're using AI tools to advance that or enhance it, that would be significant human creative input. If you're just going to a tool and you're saying, hey, make me a video about that looks like this as this kind of person in this situation, that's pulling from, you know, the data that exists either in that platform or out on the internet that's been fed into these large language models. That's not significant human creative input. You're not adding anything into that. But if you are, again, just to go back, if you are starting with your own original images, your own video samples, things like that, that would be significant. So it's going to become more and more important for teams and managers to understand licensing rights, ownership rights, I think third-party risks. That's a whole nother area. So first party would be me using a platform. Third party would be an AI tool and a platform relying on somebody else's content. This has been kind of made public with New York Times, I think is a good example, suing Google and others for basically using their published articles in order to inform their LLMs. That's a third party risk. I think that there's increasing number of transparency requirements. Canva, I know, is a widely used platform among our listening audience. I use it. I was using it this morning. I love Canva. I'm a big fan of Canva. Canva emphasizes transparency, so if you're using AI generated content in the terms and conditions of Canva, it's saying you have to say that this was used, that you used AI to generate this. Now, whether or not people follow that, that's a whole different thing, but it's one of their terms of service. I think there's questions about commercial use. If you're using AI platforms to generate content that you're using to maybe solicit donations for your ministry, there's a lot of questions that are coming around that. And then also just kind of the basic conversation around AI training, like the information that you put into these platforms can, in most cases, be used to train their models. So you are contributing that information that is proprietary to your organization. You're contributing that proprietary information to these models to help them learn and be informed. Is that something that you want to do? I think it's a good question to ask and maybe wrestle through, spend a little time thinking on that. In some cases, I would say yes. If I can help clarify maybe theological positions by informing these models with content that I believe is, verified and valid, that might be a really strategic thing to do. The question then becomes, how much of these models are really moving because of whatever individual stuff that I put in there? That's probably a whole nother issue. But all of these are things that I would just encourage our listening audience to think through and consider carefully. AI is here. It's been here a long time. It's not going anywhere. Your teams are using it probably extensively. It's worth having a conversation around the use of AI and what are the best practices for that. Now, for those that might be interested in hearing more on these topics, I would suggest Faith Tech. Our partners at Faith Tech have some tremendous resources. Nachi Lazarus, who is on the MII team, is also a great person to follow on social media. He talks a lot about these kinds of things. Nils Smith is another great MII partner, longtime contributor to MII. He's got some great content out there on this. And the MII team in the MENA region is hosting an AI conference later this fall, which should have some very good resources, a great group of speakers. And I've been invited to go speak at that. And it's probably these topics that I'm going to continue to explore. And we'll see what the world looks like in November. But those are all some great resources to follow and to consider if you and your team are interested in these ideas. So thanks for joining us for another episode of the Digital Ministry Podcast. Apologies for the lack of studio quality, but just having some very interesting, timely conversations here in Washington, D.C. this week that I wanted to share with all of you. So I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope it's been helpful. Please leave a comment or question in the chat or in the comment window of whatever platform you're using, and we'd love to respond to that. We'll see you again next time on the Digital Ministry Podcast.